I went through a phase where I was so angry, Your amygdala, like I said, convinces you that it's everybody's fault around you that you got into this situation. And I believed it. And I couldn't even look at anybody. I'm like, you guys are the reason, And then I'm like, okay, no, no. I was horrible at responding to life and things. And now it's a blessing because my mom's learning from me. My daughter, who's 12, I'm able to teach her this stuff. My son is still too little to understand, but everybody around me is learning. And it's, hopefully it never happens to anybody around me because now they know. Now they know what a nervous system is and fight or flight. Once
Yeah.
you have that first mind shift, it's over from there. It really is. And then you start noticing changes physically, mentally. You're just like, okay, now I get it. And then it's just like every month I feel like I have a new mind shift now.
How's it going, guys? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, we have Senada from New York, and she was dealing with all of these crazy symptoms for about a year, but she really turned things around and really she's getting her life back, starting to go to the gym and live life again. And it's so cool to see her start thriving. And Senada, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Senada, and I live in upstate New York. 36 years old, married. I have two kids. And this journey started for me actually last year at this time. So it's my 1 year anniversary, and here I
Yeah.
am now,
Yeah. Almost a
doing much
year.
better.
Much better. Your
Yeah.
your world is very different. Because last year you kind of hit a wall. It was around March 17th. At the time of this filming, it's March 6th.
hmm
So about a year coming up at this point. But when you first got sick and this all hit you, was it a slow buildup over time? And then one day, your nervous system kind of hit that wall, or what was that like leading up to you getting sick with this stuff?
I mean, yeah, I lived a pretty stressful life. I had a lot on my plate before that. And I guess I didn't know how to balance things before. You know what I mean? I was a chronic worrier. So I worried about everybody and everything. And I think all of that, a lot of family members with health issues, I was kind of like the caretaker for everybody. Um, I think that just like being in so many hospitals, everything. And I just one day, I think that's what happened. It just
Mm,
all hit me.
so there's a lot of health anxiety and everything.
Oh,
And
yeah.
what was that like when that first hit you on March 17th? We were talking earlier, you mentioned you went on a trip and you feel like you got sick, but kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so we went on a trip in February, came back, beginning of March. My husband and I got sick, whatever. We got out of it about a week. And then a couple of weeks go by, and I was watching a movie with my family, and I noticed like some tingling on my face, and I was like, "Oh my God, something is not right. Like my face feels weird. I've never felt this before." And then I look at my husband. I'm like, "I think I'm having a stroke or something because my mom has or had aneurysms, and my grandma's had a stroke on my mom's side." So I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like." 36 years old, I'm having a stroke. My husband looks at me and he got scared. He's like, "What's happening?" I'm like, "You might have to call an ambulance." He freaks out. I freak out even more. And yeah, I go to the emergency room. I was literally shaking like my entire body.
Hmm.
And they're like, "Yeah, you're fine. Blood looks great. You look great. You're not having a stroke. Go home." I'm like, they
Mm,
just kind of looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." So I
yeah.
came home, and then the next day it hit me even more.
Yeah. And that's
I
when it
had
really began.
so many symptoms. And then, like 2 days after that, DPDR hit. And I was just like, what am I? Who am I? Where am I? Like, it just nothing felt real. And I'm like, that's it. Then I started freaking myself out even more. And kind of like, that's when my health anxiety journey started.
Yeah. And that's when you kind of found yourself in a downward spiral. So for people who aren't familiar with DPDR, you kind of explained it there a little bit, but maybe go further. What else does that feel like? Because I've had that same feeling. It feels like you're in a dream state. You're kind of zoned out. You feel almost like you're outside your body sometimes as well.
Yeah, I remember I was driving, so I called my husband. I'm like, I'm looking at my arms, and I'm like, nothing feels real. I'm crying. I'm like, what is going on? It's like it literally feels like you're looking at your body from like a different planet. It's like, what just happened? And then it
Yeah.
freaks you out even more because I've never heard of this kind of stuff before. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. Then the internal shaking, all that stuff started after that. And then I'm like, okay, I think I officially lost that something's not right. And then that's when I looked up, on YouTube, what do internal tremors mean? And your videos came up.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, because it's interesting, not too many people talk about the DPDR and, being zoned out and feeling like you're spectating your body from a different dimension, which is what it kinda feels like, but for you, it sounds like that was one of your first main symptoms or triggers, and then that kinda started a whole cascade of anxiety, what's going on. So, in terms of symptoms, what other things were you dealing with, when all of this hit?
headaches, vision problems. I had like muscle twitching, spasms, muscle spasms, just like the shaking, weird sensations on my head, like water spots. It just felt like somebody was like pouring water on my head all the time. And that's when I
Mhm.
was like, I think I have Parkinson's. My brain's like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, MS as well on top of that,
Yeah.
ALS. So I like diagnosed myself with all of this stuff, really freaked my brain out. And my brain's like, are you sure? And I'm like, I think I have it all. And then it really hit me like complete shutdown mode.
Yeah, yeah, and what was that like, when all of this is happening, they obviously turned you away from the hospital or they checked you and they said everything was fine, they said, "Go home." So over the next several weeks, did you try going to other doctors or specialists and seeing what they would say?
Oh, Miguel, that first month, I think in the span of 2 months, I went to the emergency room about 12 times.
Holy cow.
And then on top of my doctor, who I wasn't a big fan of at the time because they were just like, it's anxiety. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, yeah, it is. I'm like, no, it's not. And then I found a new doctor, and that's when she kind of was like, this is fight or flight. And I looked at her, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what is that? And then, everything kind of started clicking. I saw a neurologist, cardiologist. I even went and we drove to New York City, 5 hours away, because there was this, what are they, body healer.
Yeah.
Yep. So he can do some body healing, like
Energy healing
releasing
stuff?
trauma, accessing all these things. My brain's like, oh, all these problems. You're having a problem. I'm gonna give you more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just kept going down, 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 and yeah, complete shutdown mode for a while.
Yeah, yeah, so, about how long did it take you to reach that kind of full shutdown mode?
3 months.
Mm. So for 3 months, it was just going downhill,
Yep.
not getting better, actually getting worse,
Yeah.
right?
I wasn't believing anybody. They're like, it's anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm like, you guys don't know anything. There's something wrong. Like, why
Yeah,
am I shaking? Why are my limbs going numb? All that stuff. So, and then
yeah.
when my doctor, the new doctor I found, she's like, it's fight or flight. And then I'm like, oh, okay.
Mhm, mhm. 'Cause that's how it was for me too. In the beginning, I was very, very wired, very jittery, lots of internal vibrations. I wasn't super, super fatigued until after a few months. So for you, did you start feeling that heaviness and that fatigue after a while of going through this? Or
Um,
was mostly the other stuff?
when I had that shutdown, that's when everything kind of hit. It was on, like, I couldn't sleep. I hit that point where like every hour I would wake up screaming, jumping out of bed, like,
Or just like adrenaline,
yes,
right?
yeah. Um, I remember like the one feeling, it was like on the top of my head because I get a lot of muscle tension. So a lot of like, it felt like somebody had a toothbrush like right in my skull and it was constantly on.
Oh,
And
like a
that's when I was like,
vibrating
what?
toothbrush?
Yeah, it was like literally vibrating, like spinning in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, this cannot be the nervous system. Like, there's no way. And sure enough, and that's 3 months after, that's when I hit rock bottom. That happened. That's when the chest pain started. Vision, I couldn't even like be around my family. I was in the room for 3 weeks straight. And I was like, okay, this is not going to get you anywhere. You got to get up. It was summer. Like, you got to get up, go outside, get some air. And then, yeah, it
Mm.
was,
Yeah,
it
it's
was
freaky.
eventful. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and it's just weird because the symptoms, a lot of them are just so strange. You try to explain it to doctors, and they just look at you like, "What are you talking about? That I've never heard that before." Like if you explain to a doctor, it feels like there's a vibrating toothbrush on my head. They look at you like you're crazy, but that's what
And
it
they
feels
did.
like.
I mean, they really did. They're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, I had an MRI, and they're like, "Everything's fine." I'm like, "There's something here."
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah,
"There's nothing. You look fine. Everything looks amazing."
yeah.
So I remember when I had my MRI, that's when it really hit me. I had it. I was so nervous because I convinced myself that I had,
They're gonna find something, right?
yeah,
And they're gonna tell
something's
you.
there.
Yeah.
So I'm like a tumor, MS, something. I had that MRI, and for some reason, I had to wait 5 days for my results. So in those 5 days, I drove myself crazy.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And after the MRI came back and they're like, "Yeah, everything's fine." I'm like, "Wow, thanks. Thanks for that."
Mhm.
But I was literally bedridden. I could not do anything. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do anything.
Yeah. Wow. So when you were at that state, because obviously you have a family, I mean, what were they thinking about all of this? The husband, the kids?
Everybody was pretty stressed out with me, my husband ended up losing weight with me because he didn't know what to
Mm,
do, he's just kind of like, what can I do besides take care of the kids and like give you
mhm.
food, but I couldn't eat. So
Yeah.
it was tough for me because your brain convinces you of all these things, and all that extra mental stuff I was adding, I didn't know any better at the time, all that negativity, like, I'm such a terrible mom, I'm such a terrible wife. Like, look at me, I'm like a vegetable laying here on the bed and they're outside playing. I can't be. So, me adding all that extra negativity just made it worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure, especially in the beginning, were you trying to Google a lot of what's going on, like Googling symptoms, and that probably put a lot of ideas in your head?
Well, that's kind of what started it. I
Yeah.
was like, why am I shaking? Why do I have muscle twitching or muscle spasms? And then obviously ALS. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God, ALS. No. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not scared to die, but I don't want to like, suffer dying.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what started. It was all Google.
Yeah, that's what's interesting. That's typically the path people go on. I mean, and it makes sense too because obviously we're curious. What are these symptoms? Google knows all the answers, but then if you type in mosquito bite, it's going to show you someone's face falling off. So it'll always show you worst case scenarios. But now it starts putting ideas in your head, and then it truly feels real. Like I thought I had Parkinson's. I was like 22, but I was shaking. Like I couldn't keep my head still. Couldn't
Oh
sleep.
yeah.
I was twitching, and I would try to sit still and relax, and then I would find my head like vibrating back and forth. Like I couldn't stop it. So it was weird, and I'm like, no, that's got to be Parkinson's. It sounds like it, or what is it, Addison's disease with my adrenals and all this stuff. So it was really freaky. So at what point in your journey did you start YouTubing this stuff and come across the CFS recovery content?
I think it was in July.
Got it. So
July,
about
I started, I'm like, I need help. Like, there's obviously doctors can't help me. Nobody's helping me. So I'm like, I got to do this on my own. I got to find the help. And then, like I said, I went on YouTube and I typed in, what are internal body tremors? Like, cause I was literally like, I felt like I was being electrocuted 24/7. And I'm
Mhm.
like, this is not right. So I Googled that and your video came up. And I'm like, and I watched it. And I'm like, nervous. What is the nervous system? Like, what is even that? Because I didn't know any of this stuff before, what a nervous system was, nothing.
Mhm.
And that's when I was like, oh my God, somebody out there understands what I'm going through. I'm not alone. So, and then,
Yeah.
obviously there's a lot of videos out there on this stuff. So I'm like, there's so many people to deal with this. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And leading up to that point, because at this point you probably exhausted all your options before you found us, um, what things did you try in order to fix this stuff? Like, did the doctors give you medication that you tried, or did they do certain treatments that didn't work prior to finding
Um,
us?
yeah, so they gave me, I had a holistic practitioner. She gave me like hundreds of dollars worth of like vitamins. I
Mm,
tried them all. Nothing worked. My doctor tried to give me medication for like nerve pain. Like, yeah, that didn't work.
so
A
like
lot of
band-aid
stuff.
fixes.
I remember at my lowest, I drove myself to the mental hospital
Mm,
and I walked in there and I'm like, something is wrong. I think I'm losing my mind. And obviously, they ask you questions and they're like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not going crazy. It's just anxiety. And I'm like, why is everybody telling me this is anxiety? It's not. I know what
yeah,
anxiety is. Like, I know what that feels like. I had anxiety, my whole life. So,
yeah,
yeah, I've tried vitamins, doctors, body healers. What else? Chiropractors. Oh my gosh, everything you can think of, I've tried it.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, it's pretty. pretty wild how you had to drive yourself to the mental hospital because you felt like you were really going crazy. Is that because you just weren't getting enough sleep, or just the anxiety was so intense you couldn't
I think
even
it was
handle
just
it?
my brain was like I was overthinking. I was just overloading it with all this like worry, you know what I mean? And my brain was just like, okay, that's it. And
Yeah.
you get to that point, like when you're at that low, where you literally, it's like you feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's one of those scary points to be because it's almost like you're not even in control of your thoughts at that point. It's like a freight train that just goes. And you're
Yeah.
trying to pump the brakes, but you can't. And sometimes the more you try to pump the brakes and slow your thoughts down, the faster it goes. It's like it keeps fighting back. So you find us about 4 months after that initial kind of incident where you went to the hospital. You find us in July. And what made you get started with us? Right? Because I know we had our call and you're like, yeah, this sounds good. What made you pull the trigger?
I've looked into other programs, spoke to people and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, this is not gonna fit. But then when I talked to you, and I just got that like genuine want to help people, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
knowing that you have been through it and the coaches have been through it, and that there's just a community of people that are kind of dealing with the same thing as me that I can kind of talk to and learn from as well, people that are ahead of me. And that's just kind of how I looked at it. I'm like, yes, this is like the perfect chance. And I remember talking to him like, Miguel, you're my last resort.
I remember
Help.
that. I do remember that. I do remember our
Yeah.
conversation very well. And, what was your first month like when you were coming to the calls and, you're hearing other people on the calls and you're going through the video modules? What was that like in your first month?
I was hearing all this information. I watched the video modules. I was hearing everything the coaches were saying, but it was not.
I
My
remember your brain
amygdala was
was,
like it took
yeah,
over. So
it was
I'm like,
resisting it, right?
I hear what you guys are saying, but I'm not getting it. Like you can talk here all day long, but it's just kind of like going over my head because I don't get it. I don't understand. I'm like, there's no way to come out of this. Like
Yeah.
that was the hardest part for me. I was like, your brain convinces you that there's no way that you can recover, and it gives you every single scenario, every person in your life, every situation. It's like, oh yeah, remember this? Yeah, this is the reason these people are triggered to you or whatever. I'm like, yep, it's true. That's the reason. I'm never gonna get out of this. And then one day I was talking to Adrienne, and she's like, Senada, you have to believe that you will get through this. And she told me your brain is lying to you. At that point, you don't understand that.
Mhm.
And then I sat down and I'm like, I can get through this. And
Yeah.
after that, it was like I had to do one little uncomfortable thing at a time. I remember making my first phone call, my heart started doing backflips. And I was just like, okay,
Mhm.
that's okay. I just continued down with my call, and that was the first thing I did. I'll never forget that day. That was like the first uncomfortable thing I did.
Yeah, one of those memorable wins, almost like a milestone, a step in the right direction that gets the ball rolling. But I remember, I think even 6 or 7 weeks in, your mind was resisting a lot of this stuff, and you were so stuck in the negativity. We'd give you advice, and then we knew we were talking to Sonata's amygdala. We knew. It's so different. It's almost like two personalities, but we see it a lot, especially in the beginning. So I remember it was like an uphill battle for that first 1 or 2 months. But then I remember we had a conversation where we're like, hey, Sonata, we got to lock in. Okay.
Yeah.
This is your brain. This is your amygdala. Trust us. And if we don't fix this now, if we can't turn this around now, it's going to be very difficult and this may not work. I remember we had that conversation and you're like, no, no, no. Okay, I'm going all in. I want this. I want my life back. And then you had that conversation with Adrienne. And then
Mhm.
in the coming weeks, you made massive progress. You probably made more progress in maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks than you did in the previous like 2 months or something. So it
Well,
was
yes,
really
in the
cool.
beginning, I was doing exposures, I was doing
Yeah.
stuff, but I was doing it with such a negative
Yeah.
mindset that it was useless. I
Mhm.
would go places and I would say things like, oh my God, why am I the only one like this? Like everybody's normal. Like I would say these things. And I'm like, oh my God, me doing all this stuff, all this negativity that I'm already adding onto it is not helping me. So me just even just cutting that out was a huge game changer.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
having a better mindset, really, really changed things for me.
Yeah, it's checking the thoughts, and scientifically, that's when we check our thoughts and don't allow it to run on this downward spiral or this cycle of negativity, we are calming down the amygdala, which is the fight or flight center. So a lot of people think it's just it's mindset or think better, but we're actually causing change in the brain. And then you started thinking more logically, right? You're very emotional at the start. The logic was very it was much lower, but then it started to
Non-existent.
switch.
It
Yeah, it's
really
almost
was
non-existent.
non-existent. It wasn't.
Yeah, like you'd see the videos, you'd hear it, but it's like the brain doesn't compute. It's like, "No, no, danger, danger, that doesn't work." But then it started to switch. You started calming the emotions down, calming the negativity down, so it allowed space for the other parts of the brain to come back online. Then you start doing more normal things. So that, phone call for you, that was one of the biggest probably the biggest mind shifts in the beginning for you or one of the biggest wins?
Yeah, that was the first one. And I'm like, okay, I got through this. I'm like, this is the only way through is through the discomfort. Like, you can't, like, I was avoiding everything, Miguel. I literally laid on my couch with a blanket over my head. Like, I wasn't parenting. I was, it's like this fear takes over you. I was afraid to like talk to my kids because them just screaming would trigger me. I'm like, that, okay, this is not going to work. So I had to like sit there, let them scream and respond differently than before. And
Mhm.
sometimes I would even like scream with them, like, this is so much fun. So
Mhm.
it's like stuff like that, me going to the gym. Like, I remember how much pain I was in even September. Like, the physical pain that I was in is unbelievable. Chest pain, like headaches, everything. I'm like, how am I ever going to come out of this? Like, there's no way. But then reminding myself, this takes time. It's because everybody's looking for that magic pill, like just want it instantly gone. And that's not the case. So I had to sit down, like, it's going to take time. This is not an overnight thing. And then 2 months into it, I'm like, I started noticing changes. I noticed, I'm like, oh, wow, I feel better. Like, the chest pain is gone. And like little things like that would like disappear. I'm like, oh my God, this is working. And then it just kind of, makes
Mhm.
you want to go even more.
Yeah, and were you doing the brain retraining exercise for the pain, or did it go away on its own?
No, I didn't. I could not figure out how to do it. It was my amygdala was just
Yeah.
too powerful, man. It was like so in control of everything.
Yeah. No, that's great that your pain started going away, and that's the thing too. Once you start seeing a few wins and seeing some changes, and then also when you come to terms with the fact that okay, this is not going to be an overnight thing. Nothing outside of me is going to solve this. I'm not going to take some magical pill and it's going to help. Once that clicks, I feel like it makes the journey so much easier because, going back to one of the topics we talk about now, black and white thinking, trying to look for a magical pill is very black and white. It's almost like you're banking on winning the lottery with some medication, but it's almost like a disempowering thing because if you think something outside you is going to fix you, you're not really believing in yourself that you can fix this thing. But
Mhm.
once you accept full responsibility and you're like, no, I'm going to be the one that gets me out of this, but it's going to take time, but I'm okay with that. I feel like that's when people make so much progress that we see because that's a lot more of a logical thing than praying and hoping that the next magical thing is going to come and fix you. So after that phone call, right, and you had to really kind of push past your comfort zone mentally with that,
Mhm.
right? A lot of people think it's just you have to add in walking or activities, but a lot of things it's mental, right? You have
I
to
would say most of it is mental, honestly. At least for me, it was. I was,
Mhm,
yeah, I would get tired like doing physical stuff. I was still like making myself like do laundry here and there, but it's most of it is mental.
mhm,
If you can just get that right mindset, and not entertain those negative thoughts, not stay away from rabbit holes. Don't engage with that stuff. Like, you don't have to be overly positive, but just kind of,
yeah,
staying neutral. When I had that, when I made that phone call and my heart decided to do a flip, I could have been like, oh my God, what was that? But I'm like, no, that's part of the process. Like, I have to go through this. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So it was tough because I'm like, things that used to be so easy for me to do, now it's like it's so hard to even make a phone call. But I made so many phone calls and now I can just talk
yeah.
to on the phone forever.
Yeah, now it's just a normal thing, but
Yeah.
when you start, it's almost like you're relearning how to do things all over again. It's like your brain forgets how to feel safe doing things, and anything feels like dangerous or at risk for some reason. I mean, what could happen on a phone call? Nothing really, but your brain sees it as a terrifying thing,
Well,
right?
I think a lot of it is like, for at least for me, I was doing those things to myself. So, like, when I was going through it, I would be watching TV, and then, like, let's say I get blurry vision, and I'm like, oh, my brain doesn't want me to watch TV. I better turn it off, you know.
Hmm.
And that's what I was doing. So I was doing everything you weren't supposed to. And then eventually I was like, okay, it's time to start watching TV Sonata again and respond differently. And I did. And now I could watch anything and everything from, comedy to horror, whatever it is. So,
Yeah, that's exciting. So after you made that phone call and things start moving in the right direction, what was another big win you had? What was like the next big thing that you remember?
um,
Because you had a lot of wins in the Discord channel that we've seen over the last few months, but do you remember, does something stand out after that? Um,
I was it in November or December. I went to a concert that was
I remember
huge.
that. Yeah.
Because, well, I had like a strict sleeping schedule. I'm like, I have to be in bed at 10 o'clock. Like, how am I going to go out till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? But I did it. We stayed up until 3 a.m. Slept in that day. I felt really good the next day. I was just so happy. And then another big thing for me was, I remember going to my grandma's house, and me walking in, I was getting these like heavy, heavy, like fight or flight feelings. And I'm like, you're not running. You're going to sit here and you're going to talk to her
Yeah.
like you normally would, have a conversation with her. And I did. And I sat there for 15 minutes. I had all the feelings, symptoms, thoughts come through, and I just kind of welcomed it all. And I just talked to her
Mhm.
and eventually calmed down.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And
And
now, like the day after that, I went in and I don't get those feelings anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like the more you do it, it just becomes like a normal thing.
yeah. And I feel like in everybody's recovery, there are a lot of these crucial kind of crossroads, these moments where you're faced with a discomfort and you can choose either to respond well or not respond well, but then you go back kind of, not all the way back to square one, but you'll be at a roadblock until you can face that discomfort and respond well. And for people watching this, that's not saying, oh, if you go for a walk for 5 minutes and you feel discomfort, don't walk for another 20 minutes. But in certain situations like this, where you're sitting down with someone, you feel the temporary discomfort, you feel the butterflies in your stomach, the
Hmm.
adrenaline coming. If you respond well, you will tell your body, you'll train it that, hey, this is okay. And usually for situations like this, you only have to go through that discomfort once or twice. And then your brain knows, okay, this is not dangerous anymore. And it'll let go
That's
the next.
exactly what happened. Yes. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I just got tired of running, and like, oh my God, a lot of it was my own doing, not knowing any better. So before I knew all this stuff, I would sit there and like have a conversation with me. Somebody would say something, trigger my amygdala. I'm like, that's it. That person triggered me. I can't talk to them anymore. So I had to like undo all the damage that I've done.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I can't control what other people do or say, but I can control how I respond to it. And that's by allowing triggers to happen, but me just not adding any mental stories to it. You know what I mean? Just letting it happen, kind of let the discomfort go through, and eventually it calms down.
Absolutely. And that's why the golden rule is responding well to symptoms, because triggers are an interesting topic. What is a trigger for one person may not be a trigger for someone else. So once you realize that triggers are subjective, that we have the power to control our response to these things, it just it's game changing. And it doesn't just help in recovery, because in recovery we teach responding well to symptoms, but also responding well to stressors. So as you move forward in life and start reintegrating back into life, you start to learn to respond well to many other situations outside of recovery as well. So for you've shared a lot of golden nuggets within the program. What do you think were some of the most helpful things? Some people say the community is great, just knowing that they're not the only one dealing with this. Some of them, it's learning kind of the science of what's going on. But for you, what really stood out? What do you think helped you the most?
The coaches, number one, and obviously community second. But like just knowing that, how in bad they were off, in their journey, and they made it through. Them just knowing this is so amazing, and they're just so easy to talk to, and they're always there. Anytime I had a question, even though a lot of times I was a little, too much like, what is happening? And she's like, it's your amygdala. I'm like, no, no, no. It was just amazing having them there, and now I don't need them as much, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's almost like a safety net, just knowing that you can turn to them, especially during flare-ups, that, you're not all on your own with this, and you can advise with people who have been in your shoes before. But it's interesting because there's a lot of people as well, once they recover and they scroll back and look up at their chats, they're like, "Holy cow, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I sent you all these paragraphs." And we're
I
like, "It's
don't think I
okay."
ever want to go back through mine. It just didn't happen.
Yeah, because it's just some people, it's just like paragraphs but we understand too, we know it's not them talking, it's their amygdala, so we see it all the time, but it's so interesting seeing people's almost like their personalities change as they get better, they become way more calm, uh, way more resilient, way more positive too, and it's like a night and day difference, like, if you were to ever go and look at them, it'll be like a whole different person, you
You
know?
just get like a new appreciation for life,
Yeah.
and like you just like, oh my God. I used to be one of those people like, why did this happen to me? Why me? Like, why? There's so many terrible people out there. Like, how did this happen to me? So I went from like that victim mentality, like this happened to me, to now I'm more like this happened for me. Like it's teaching me so many things about myself, like bad habits I've had that I'm working on, still changing.
Mhm.
And like Junior always says, responding better to life. I was horrible at it before. I was horrible. And now, it takes time. You're literally like reprogramming years of like bad habits. You know what I mean? So, and that's what I have to remind myself, Senada, this takes time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
It takes months, a year. It doesn't matter. I stopped focusing on how long it's going to take.
Yeah,
And
and
that
that's
was
a
big too.
huge thing.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that helps people make way faster progress. Once you stop putting time limits or time expectations on these things, we see people's recoveries skyrocket because that only adds pressure. And it also is one of those, maybe habits in a previous lifetime that led to you getting CFS. Because it's also interesting because when you came back from that trip, both you and your husband got sick, but you're the one who got it real bad, right?
Yeah.
And we see that there are precursors to people getting this. So if you were like an overthinker, an over worrier, type A personality, go, 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 then you're more likely to get something like this because you've been hovering that edge of your nervous system all
Hmm.
this time. And all it took was one virus or cold to put you over the edge.
The entire time we were on that vacation, I was worrying about my mom because she was having some health stuff going on. She
Mm,
just had one of her aneurysms clipped, so she was taking some medicine, having some issues. So the whole time I was like, she was in the back of my mind, you know, thinking about her, worrying about her. So it was a lot of stress I was under, but I'm I went through a phase where I was so angry, Your amygdala, like I said, convinces you that it's everybody's fault around you that you got into this situation. And I believed it. And I couldn't even look at anybody. I'm like, you guys are the reason, And then I'm like, okay, no, no. It's just I was horrible at responding to life and things. And
mm,
now it's a blessing because my mom's learning from me. My daughter, who's 12, I'm able to teach her this stuff. My son is still too little to understand, but everybody around me is learning. And it's, hopefully never happens to anybody around me because now they know. Now they know what a nervous system is and fight or flight.
yeah, yeah, and if you ever see any signs, you know how to guide them out of it,
Yeah.
but sometimes you have to hit those rock bottom moments in order to create massive change and just pivot the way you think and the way you approach life, and for a lot of people, that's why CFS or any of these symptoms, going through this illness, it can be the biggest gift, once you come out the other side, because you come out, and I always tell people this, you come out a 2.0 version of yourself, you come out a better version, you actually don't go back to your old life. the way you think is it's like a new and improved version. So that's what we see a lot, and we've definitely seen it with you, and it's been really, really cool to see. So
Mhm.
now that you're way more functional and you're reintegrating back into life, what are some things you can do now that you couldn't do, back when you started with us?
I couldn't hang out with people. I could not be around people. That was, for some reason, people were a huge trigger for me. So I was avoiding at all times. I wasn't cooking at all. Like we just ate out all the time. My husband would buy food or my mom would make something and like, bring it to us. I avoided everything.
And
Phone calls,
were you
text.
housebound when you started
I
with us?
was, yeah, yeah, I
Housebound,
was.
right? On the
Up
couch all day.
until September, I would say I was housebound because I was just freaking out. I'm like, why am I thinking this? Like, I was just making it worse. Like, why am I having these thoughts?
It was
Why
a
is this
spiral,
happening?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And then, yeah, that's things just, once
yeah,
you have that first mind shift, it's over from there. It really is. And then you start noticing changes
uh,
physically, mentally, and you're just like, okay, now I get it. And then it's just
mhm.
like every month I feel like I have a new mind shift now.
Yeah, it's our slogan. You're just one mind shift away because we know that that first mind shift, that's like a domino. You have a domino effect, then it leads to another mind shift and another mind shift and bigger mind shifts. So it's always cool when we see people have their first mind shift because I feel like based on what I've seen and what I've experienced, people truly are just one mind shift away. That's what causes a whole cascade on the upward spiral instead of
Mhm.
being on the downward spiral. So you're doing a lot more now. You're doing social interactions, you're hanging out with friends, you're going out, and you're going to the gym, right?
Gym, I wasn't able to go to the grocery store even in October. Now I even go with my kids. I take them with me. They're screaming, I want this, I want that, all that, wait in long lines. I can do all of that now. So what else?
Yeah. For the gym, how often are you going
Multiple times a
typically?
week. I try to teach my, I'm trying to also be mindful of my body and like
Yeah,
not
you don't
overdo
push
it.
too hard, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so, I'll miss a day here and there. And when I go, I'm not like, I have to lift this. I just like to keep my body moving.
Yeah.
So I
That's
do go
awesome.
multiple times a week. We go to the sauna, steam room. I've gotten massages, like 15 minutes laying on a table. Like, I can't believe I did that. I could basically do anything I want now.
That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got your life back. And in terms of like mentally and cognitively, you can watch movies, you could think straight. Do you have any of the DPDR anymore or any of that kind of
No.
stuff? Yeah.
Now I just have a little bit of tension left. So when my amygdala gets a little excited, my body tenses up.
Hmm.
But then I know that's going to go in time. I'm not worried about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I
And
had
at this
so much
rate,
tension in my neck and my throat. Like my throat was, I remember like it would twitch so much. And it felt like things were like moving in there. Like it was unbelievable. And I'm like,
yeah.
there's no way this is ever going to get better. And
Hmm.
sure enough, so the way I look at it, and somebody told me this, your nervous system can handle stress. Life is stressful, to your amygdala, walking is stressful, but that's okay. It's just us adding, you got to eliminate all the extra stuff that we add onto it mentally. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and really retraining the amygdala as well because it's misinterpreting, walking. Uh, it's confusing that with running away from lions or, walking out on your sidewalk to get the mail. It's confusing that with walking in a unknown jungle that a snake could come out and bite you at any time. It's really the primal brain that's on. It sees danger in nearly every single situation, even though it's not dangerous. So it's really retraining that danger perception of everything. But once you do that, the symptoms start going down. You start having more energy. Life starts to open up again and you're able to reintegrate. So, for you, what is probably the biggest golden nugget you can share with people? You've shared a lot of really good ones, but the Sonata last year, let's say the Sonata in July or June, right? When you're at rock bottom, if you
Hmm.
could go back in time and teleport and tell her something, you had like 2 minutes to talk with her, what would you tell her?
Oh man,
It's a deep question.
it gets better. It really does.
Gets
I
better.
don't. It's me just even thinking about it. Oh my god. Now I can laugh about it, but
It's-
it gets
yeah.
better. It really does. If you put in the work, it really, really does get better. And if I can do it, like when I tell you I was probably maybe one of the most difficult people that that the coaches have dealt with, because it was I did not see a way out. I was just like, there's no way. And then it's like you see all these people get better, and I'm like, there's no way. I have all these things in my life that are not going to let me get there. And then I stopped believing my brain, and that's the difference. Now I don't believe my brain anymore. Then I believed everything.
Yeah. 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 And you've done remarkable. I'm so excited to see what's to come for your journey. Do you have any big plans coming up this year that you want to do? Any bucket list things?
um my husband just got a new job recently, so he can't take any time off for a while. So hopefully we get to do something with the kids this summer, and if we do that retreat, I'm probably going to be there. So
Yep. Yep. We're planning that. That's in
yeah.
Hawaii. The Thrive Retreat is going to be super exciting. Um, what does your husband think about all of this? Seeing you go through this whole thing and really turn things around. Like, what's his reaction to everything?
He's happy now that I'm kind of back in my normal life. So I can do homework with the kids and everything. I remember being scared to just stay home with the kids. I'm like, I would call him like, something's wrong. I'm scared to be home alone with them. Now we have, he's constantly working. It's just me and them most of the time. So he's happy. He's relieved, that I do have the help and that I am getting better. Because like I said, it was hard for me, but it was hard on him and everybody else around me, because everybody wants to help, but nobody knows how.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, you know, if people are going through this and family is supporting or friends are supporting it, it's like, even though they may not fully understand what you went through, they were also in the trenches with you. So it does feel good to be able to give back to those people. I remember my grandma, she was spoon feeding me, cooking for me every day, bringing food upstairs
Hmm.
multiple times a day. And she was like 73 at the time. I'm 22 at the time. So when I did get better, it's interesting. It's like the roles reversed because she actually ended up getting cancer, but she's all good now. But I was the one driving her to appointments. I was the one pushing her in a wheelchair. Meanwhile, 6 months prior, she was feeding me. It's it's just a different feeling when you can give back to those people who are there for you. You
And
know.
it- the hardest part for me was when I was hijacked by my amygdala, all the like negative thoughts that I was getting about my family. And that was so hard for me, because I'm like, why am I getting these thoughts? Like, these people are amazing. All my mom wants to do is help me. All my husband wants to do is help me. Like, why am I getting these thoughts about these people? I
Mhm.
just couldn't understand it. So I was so hard on myself for it. And that I'm like, it's all a lie. Like that's all it is. So even now
Yeah.
I'll get thoughts and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
Me
Sure.
too. Like, the amygdala is always there trying to play tricks on you, but now I can really spot it, and you probably can too.
Oh yeah.
You can tell when it's trying to play tricks on you.
Well, to be honest, Miguel, now, even before this happened, let's say even 2 years ago, and I'll think back and I'm like, oh my God, that was my amygdala. Like certain situations, I'm like, that was my amygdala. That was like that part of my brain. I didn't know what it was then. But now it's just like nice knowing this information, and it changes your life. It really does. I could handle something better than even myself 2 years ago. So you definitely become like a 2.0 version of yourself.
Yeah, yeah, you're much more resilient. I call it like anti-fragile because that's another fear a lot of people have is like, oh, if I recover again, is it going to be like walking on eggshells? Can I just get sick at any time? And I say no. You'd have to do a lot of the wrong things in order to get sick again. And let's say someone got COVID. Sure, yeah, you might be out for a couple weeks, but you're never going to be in the trenches like you were before because now you have the tools to get out. It's kind of like back if we rewind back to a year ago, it's like you were in the trenches, but you didn't have a ladder. You didn't even know which way was out. You're just stuck. It was pitch black in a trench. Now we have a flashlight, we have a ladder, we have all these things, so we can easily get out, 100 times faster. We have the tools, and you truly become anti-fragile also because we're not just responding to symptoms, but responding to life. And if you can respond well to life, this isn't going to happen again. because your nervous system has so much space in its threshold. You're not always redlining it, you know?
Mhm.
There's a lot more space and you're
And I
not putting that
remember
pressure.
you was it a one of them video modules? I can't remember what you said, but that's when it clicked, and I'm like, "Oh my god." It was just it was incredible. The things you were saying, it was just like all I'm like, "Yes, yes." That's exactly what's going on through my head, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
just knowing that, like, separating yourself from it, I have to constantly remind myself, like, let's say somebody does something and I get frustrated. I'm like, this is not me. This is like fight or flight part of my brain. I have to constantly remind myself of that, like, separate yourself from it.
exactly. And one of the biggest things that helps people and something that you figured out, it's identifying the roadblocks. Like, or well, what led you to this place, but also what's keeping you stuck. So for you, you knew it was your amygdala going on a downward spiral. But once you identify that and pretty much accepted the fact that, okay, this is my amygdala, I got to do something about this. Once you identify the problem that needs to be solved, and usually for people, that's what it is. It's the amygdala. Everything else becomes much easier after that because you're not trying to solve 50 different problems, solve 50 different symptoms. You're really solving one problem that fixes all the other symptoms downstream. And
Hmm.
once you fix that, start fixing that one thing, everything else starts to improve. You see a lift in
Yes.
everything else, you
I
know.
was in problem solving mode for like a good 6, 7 months. I would wake up every morning. First thing that would hit me, how do I get out of this? What do I do? How? Please, somebody give me the magic pill, make it all go away. You hear people saying, I want my life back. No, I don't want to be the person I was before ever again. Like, I want to be better. And I am stronger now, and I'm not fully recovered than I ever was before. Now I can
Exactly.
handle things better because I know how to handle it.
Yeah. And if you're feeling like this and, 6 months ago you were just starting to drive and stuff and, you know, just being functional again, imagine where you're going to be in another 3 months or 6 months or by the end of the year. Imagine the Sonata that could be. So, you are in the process of rebuilding the 2.0 version of yourself. You're already surpassed where you were before in terms of nervous system resilience. So it's super exciting to see. And I'm just really excited to see your story unfold. My last question for you,
Mhm.
Sonata, is overall, would you say it was a good investment joining Recovery
Oh,
Jumpstart?
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Worth every penny.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I
Well,
recommend.
thank you. Is there anything else you want to share with people watching this right now?
Believe in yourself. Believe. That's huge. That makes a huge difference. Believe in yourself. Believe recovery is possible. Don't believe every lie your brain is telling you right now, because 99% of it is all lies. And just do what the coaches tell you, and you will never, it's impossible to go backwards
Yeah.
ever. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, you can't go backwards. You can't not make progress if you follow the principles. It's just there are certain laws in place. It's like, oh, okay, if you lift up an apple, you drop it, it will drop. If you do A, B happens. If you do X, Y happens. If you follow the principles, you will see improvements. And it all starts there.
Mhm.
So Sonata, it's been a great chat. Really appreciate you coming on here and sharing some of your story. And I would love to do this again in 6 months or even further down the road when you're even better and we get another update to see how much more you're thriving. So for people watching this right now, if you did need some extra help, if any of this resonates with you and you wanted some hands-on support, wanted to work with our team, you can click the link down below and learn more about how we can help you. Obviously, you have to go through a screening process, and we want to make sure you're the perfect fit if we were to move forward. But I'll leave that link in the description below. But always remember, as always, you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. See you guys in the next video. Thanks so much, Sonata.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Miguel.